Hello and welcome back to Louis Bertou's Music Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing Sonic Youth's Daydream Nation. Their 1988 magnum opus double album. Sonic Youth's Daydream Nation was the band's fifth album, or sixth if you count their first EP. So the band had been producing records for a little while now. They've definitely developed a sound. I really enjoy the band's earlier albums such as Bad Moon Rising and Sister, and even Evol's okay as well. But for me, this blows the rest of them out of the water for me. This is an insanely big step up in terms of quality. That's not to say that it's totally different in, sound. Like I said, the Sonic Youth sound is still here. That kind of no-wave influenced simplicity, as well as the sort of cathartic noise element is definitely still prevalent that we saw on albums like Sister. However, what's different is the band have changed label, they've also changed producer, and according to Thurston Moore, this is the band's first non-econo record, which by that I assume he means it's a cheaper record. No, a more expensive one to make, jeez. And perhaps that was due to enlisting Nick Sansano to record it, who was already quite a popular producer due to his work with hip-hop artists actually in the late 80s. Namely, I think Ice Cube and Public Enemy he worked with, but don't quote me on that. Interestingly enough though, the band Sonic Youth really felt that their sound matched the style that Nick Sansano was bringing to these hip-hop artists, which kind of shows you that there's quite a diverse range of influences that the band is taking at this stage. Now, not only is this album a double album, so it's a little bit more developed and sprawling than the previous records, the songs themselves are also more developed, I think. Songs do kind of push into the 6-7 minute mark, but never feel like they're being dragged out or overdone. I think a lot of the songs feel shorter than they are, but actually you look and then you realise they're 6 or 7 minutes long and you just think, well, that's crazy, how did they manage that? And I think it's more of a developed compositional style. They're starting to introduce more sections into the songs, which they had done on the previous few records. But they're, in addition to the extra sections, these sections are let to kind of open up themselves, and there's a lot more breathing space on the songs on Daydream Nation. Sister is a brilliant album, a blistering sort of punk rock album. This one breathes. Now, just a note, on first listen, and even if you've listened to this album a couple of times, I think it's quite unfriendly to the listener. A lot of the songs kind of start to sound a little bit similar, if you're not necessarily used to them yet, aka you haven't listened to this record a fair few times, There's this murkiness to the album, which I think is quite well summed up by the colour scheme of the cover, and the back cover as well. Both of these are paintings by a guy called Gerard Richter. I think I'm saying that wrong. But anyway, this murkiness is definitely on the cover, it's in the music, it's wrapped up in the experience of this album. It kind of feels like you're in a pool or something, and songs don't come to you as specific entities, but they're all kind of blurred into each other. And that can be unfriendly, especially when matched with the sort of distorted and angular cathartic sound of the record. But I will say, much like the cover again, there's this light in amongst the murkiness, and that really, for me, embodies the insane level of beauty and emotional kind of capacity that this music has. This might just be nostalgia, but it's one of the most amazing capsules of a feeling, I think this album is. And that feeling is pure, like melancholic sadness, happiness, bittersweet, ecstasy, but also depression. It's a very I feel like the spectrum of tone and emotion on this album is very high, and that comes with repeated listens. I'm saying this as if like the whole album takes a few goes to kind of crack. It's not the case. There's a few songs on here that, for me, were really the entry point into this album. First of all, obvious, Teenage Riot, track number 1. The sound of those guitars at the start, like there's nothing more beautifully bittersweet than that in music, I don't think. Just the way they're strumming as if sort of almost aimlessly, these chords that just manage to perfectly encapsulate that feeling of like walking around on a sort of overcast, maybe like drizzly, cloudy, grey day, and just looking around you without any sort of agenda. It's just beautiful stuff. And then when the actual song comes in, obviously the song's a banger too, so that's definitely a track that I think anyone can really enjoy. And it's really one that I couldn't even get past when I first heard this album. I just kept replaying that song. And Silver Rocket, the second track, so those two, I kind of just needed those two really and didn't really bother delving deeper into the album. I say that though, there was one song near the end that actually also I used to kind of go to before I, let's say, cracked the album. And I used to listen to the song Kissability a lot. I think it's track 11 or so. Near the end of the record anyway, Kissability. That one also had this kind of bittersweet, melancholic sound to it. But in a more, like, sort of punky way, sort of up-tempo way. I'd never heard anything like it, really. Just the pairing of guitars on this track is something you don't hear a lot. It's got this, like, slightly detuned sound. You've got these, well, you've got alternate tunings, alternate guitar tunings from both Ronaldo and Moore. And then them playing together creates this sound that's unlike anything else you can really hear in alternative rock, especially at that time. So yeah, you got those two clanging over each other. You got Kim Gordon absolutely holding it down with just this beautiful binary bass line, just high note, low note, high note, low note, high note. You know, that for me, I think that kind of shows that there's still some no wave sensibility about this music. The band were a no-wave band back in the early 80s. Check out first EP, it's got that primitive sound. But it's nice to see that some of that primitive nature is still conserved, especially in the bass lines of this album. Kim Gordon's just a monster, absolutely love her bass playing. It's probably some of my favourite parts on this album are actually just bass lines. But at first you might be hearing something, say I'd be hearing a riff. I love it. I don't know why I love it though, and then I listen closer and I realise this bass is just underneath playing, yeah, one of those two-note riffs. Or sometimes Kim Gordon plays in the higher register of the bass during really climactic points. Take the outro of The Wonder, say. The point where Thurston Moore starts going, "See the flashing eyes, they're flashing," etc., you know. Like Kim Gordon, this is probably the climax of the album, right? The Wonder. Absolutely pummeling song. So cathartic. And right at the apex of it, Kim Gordon's playing in the high register of the bass. And I'm just thinking, like, man, that's such a ballsy choice, because you'd think you'd want to fill out the sound as much as possible during a climax. So you'd go down to the bottom of the bass and really get that thumping sound. But no, Kim Gordon goes to the top of the bass, right in the high registers, and it has, I don't know, it gives the music this frenetic, tense quality. You'll know what I mean when you listen to that bit. It's just so... man, it sounds like it's hungry. It sounds like it's hungry for more. And then Thurston's delivery over the top just seals the deal. Really, that's one of my favourite points on the album, and it's really contributed to heavily by Kim Gordon's bass playing. Back to the songs. So we've got 3 songs there that I think are quite good, well, entry points to this album. At least they were for me. Kissability, Silver Rocket, and especially Teenage Riot. Like, I'd certainly listened to the other tracks, but none of them really popped out, really, and made me go, wow, that's great. They just all kind of melded into one entity. Murky, heavy entity. That was until, anyway, the Sprawl, track 3, really hit me. I guess firstly it's just a really good song, but in classic Daydream Nation style, the song isn't even the whole of it. Because you got this outro to the track, which takes up a good few minutes. where the band just seem to be daydreaming together on this one beautiful chord progression. You've got Steve Shelley, the drummer, kind of playing more texturally. Starts off slow and low, and then generally builds into this really loud, overwhelmingly sort of clangy, just chord sequence basically, until the noise does take over right at the very end. But it doesn't take over for long, because the start of the next track, Cross the Breeze, is another kind of just beautiful moment on this album. Just those guitars at the start. Again, it's the guitars, man. These guitars just, they sound like nothing else. And I know it's tuning, and I know it's just the great interplay between Moore and Ronaldo, but man, they did so well to get so many beautiful ideas on this album, and this is just one of them. The intro to Cross the Breeze, check it out. So yeah, those two moments, shall we say, in tandem, you got the outro of the Sprawl and the intro to Cross the Breeze, made me sit up and take notice. And then from that point on, I was kind of sold, really. The punkiness of Cross the Breeze, Eric's Trip, a bit of a light-hearted tune, total trash, more of a kind of a noise rock improvisation track, but it's fucking good. But then really, my favourites for a long time were actually the heavier tracks on side 2. So Hey Joni and The Wonder especially. And Hey Joni is probably still my favourite song on the album. It just absolutely pummels. It's Lee Ronaldo's best song for sure. For sure. The Wonder, of course, is along the same lines of Hey Joni. It's another punky track, which I like for the same reasons. But another moment that I want to kind of pick up on from the second half of the album is within the song Candle. It's the two chords in particular that bring in the verses each time. So just before the verse of the song Candle, there are these two chords, and it sounds like they're both changing and not changing at the same time. And it's a really beautiful effect, and one that makes that song stick out in my head even more, even though it is just a great song. It's moments like that that really put it over the edge. So there's not really a dud song on this album. Even songs like Providence have their place as a kind of cool down moment, especially after a song like Hey Joni. And the closing track, Elimination Junior, while it's not one of my favourites, I couldn't think of a better way to end this album, personally. Especially again after all the cathartic intensity of The Wonder, and especially Hyperstation. Underrated song right there. Have I talked about them all? Oh no, I haven't talked about Rain King. Now Rain King is along the same lines, I think, as Eric's Trip. A bit more of a light-hearted Lee Ronaldo song. I say light-hearted, I mean upbeat. It's not light-hearted at all. It's still pretty depressing. But I love Rain King. It's just heavy as fuck. So that's most of the songs on the album, and actually, just talking about them now, it makes me realise how well sequenced this album is, and how there's really no filler, I would argue. Amazingly, as this is a double album, usually you can afford a little filler, on a double album, because the band's trying new things, they're expanding, they're developing. There's bound to be a few mistakes, a few kind of missed chances or failed experiments. But on this album, man, Sonic Youth, they don't waste any time here. It's pretty stellar stuff. It's definitely the best album of 1988 for me. One of the top 5's got to be from the 80s. Probably top 3 actually. Yeah, for those reasons I would give this album a strong 10 out of 10. For sure, and my voice has been going this whole time, it's not pleasant. There's much more I'd like to say about this album, but I'm going to have to let the music do the talking and hope that whoever sees this review checks it out, or at least checks out something like Teenage Riot, or maybe listens to one of the deeper cuts. I'd recommend Hey Joni, and Cross the Breeze, and The Wonder, and oh god, I'm going to stop now, so just name all the tracks. But yeah, Daydream Nation, 10 out of 10 for sure. See you in the next review.